Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody to today's online event with MECLA, the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I'm speaking to you from Gadigal land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating today. Now, my name is Hudson Worsley from Precinct, and I have the honour of being MECLA's chair. Thank you very much for dialing in. Whether you are in lockdown or not, Zoom fatigue is something we are bearing in mind. I, for one, have just been enduring my son's saxophone lesson in the next room, and I'm very happy to say it's just wrapped up. We're going to keep this short to an hour to try and prevent Zoom fatigue. But we will be recording today's event, so anyone who's missed it can have a chance to catch on. The usual Zoom rules apply. Please mute yourself, put your full name in the Zoom label so people know who you are. Use the chat function for comments and questions. We'll have I mentioned this is brief, but hopefully we'll have a chance to chat back to our speakers at the end of the session, where we'll be fielding some questions. So, the purpose of today's event, well, it's twofold. Firstly, a quick update on MECLA and what the Do Tank has been doing. Secondly, our focus on innovation opportunities with three guest presenters. Jason Nielsen from Climate-KIC will be sharing the latest research results from the Australian Industry Energy Transitions Initiative. Sophia Hamblin Wang will tell us about a very exciting carbon capture and usage initiative. And David Eckstein from the City of Sydney will be talking to us about a trial of low carbon concrete. I'd like to thank our 74 founding partners. That's a fantastic number. So very much want to thank everybody who has now signed up, and the number keeps climbing, which is just fantastic. And remind our founding members and all attendees today that we operate under a governance framework, and we do that, and we do not engage in any anti-competitive behaviours. That's the key point. Our governance framework is based on the following values: collaboration, radical collaboration, some are calling it, integrity, leadership, opportunity and transparency. So we're sharing everything that gets produced, all documents or files are available to all members on our Google Drive so that everything is available and transparent. Our purpose, maybe the next slide. Oh, let me come back to that. Here, sorry, go back to the logos. This membership breadth is what gives MECLA its strength. We have people from and organisations from across the construction ecosystem, and that is why MECLA is such a formidable concept. The collaboration from suppliers, builders, architects, ratings mechanisms, engineers, and everybody in between. It's just fantastic to have that many organisations coming together with this common purpose. So to the 74 who have gone to the trouble of signing up, sharing their logos and are contributing, thank you very much. And we're collaborating as organisations. We're coming together to drive embodied carbon down in building and construction around Australia. This is aligned to the Paris Agreement targets and the principles of the circular economy. We know it's a complex ecosystem and we know that change is hard, and that's why we're bringing everybody together to work on it. Next slide. Okay, so how are we doing this? Hopefully some of you will remember when we first came together, we launched a research paper from WWF and Precinct with funding from New South Wales Government. At the same time that Lend-Lease launched an equivalent or a similar paper looking at their supply chain to say, well, what are the barriers, what are the enablers, and what change can come about? Demonstrating demand for these low carbon materials is a key part of that. Defining best practice of embodied carbon evaluation frameworks, another key part. Sharing the knowledge overcoming the myths, the old timers who will say, oh, it's never been done, you can't do this, can't do that. Well, there are many examples, we'll hear some today, of how things can be done and what is happening. So that's important to share that knowledge. Developing a common language so that we can, when in the not distant future, people can specify, procure based on a common language of, well, what do we mean by low carbon? What does low carbon steel mean? What does low carbon concrete mean? That will be agreed by our working groups. Helping to manage the transition risks. Obviously, there are huge opportunities that we are dialed into in MECLA, but we recognise that there are major climate transition risks that are faced, particularly by the big incumbents in the material side of the ecosystem. So that's something we're looking at as well. And then looking at supporting the materials that are going through the major changes, and looking at alternative new materials that provide opportunities to move beyond business as usual. Next slide, Cardi, please. So our working groups are really working on those concepts that I've just talked through. Our 4 working groups, and then the 5th group is has a subgroups based on the materials. So there's the steel working group, concrete and cement, aluminium, and then our other materials. We've had a spotlight on aluminium, and we'll have similar events on the other materials in the not too distant future, so please stay tuned to that. Next slide, Gati. Now, you will have heard that June and July were case study months, and there's still a little time to get in your case study. What you can see here is a mock-up of the template that gets spat out from the Sustainable Supply Chain School is running this for us. And by going through adding your content into the template, what comes out will look like this, hopefully with some legible text, but the idea being we have a consistent set of examples from across our ecosystem to show what is being done. And if you haven't done one yet, I strongly encourage you to do so, because the template makes it pretty easy. And this is a great opportunity to get on the front foot and to show off what your organisation has been doing and what lessons you've learned, and how we can share that information for everybody else to look at. All right, next slide, Kati. So actually, I might come back to that one at the end. I'd now like to hand over to our speakers. Our first speaker is Jason Nielsen. He is the Director of Strategic Projects at Climate-KIC, the Australian Industry Energy Transition Initiative. And I'd like to hear from him about looking towards decarbonising steel, aluminium in the supply chain. So, Jason, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Hudson. I'll just share my screen. I can do that. Thank you very much, and I'm really happy to be here to introduce to all of you the Australian Industry Energy Transition Initiative, and as well present some of our initial findings from the first phase of our work. The Industry ETI, as we call it, is a platform for Australia's emission-intensive industry and related businesses to coordinate learning and action on net zero emission supply chains, and really to bring them together to accelerate informed action and to support them so that they continue to thrive in a decarbonised global economy. We're convening industry and business leaders to collectively explore and address the challenges associated with climate change. Our focus is on 5 supply chains, as we call them. So that's iron and steel, aluminium, LNG, other key metals and chemicals. When it comes to other key metals, we're focused on copper, nickel, and lithium, and chemicals is fertilizers and explosives. And we're working with organizations along the supply chains within these. At the heart of the initiative are our industry partners, and we have 16 industry partners today, and that list is continuing to grow. So we have heavy industry partners such as BHP, BlueScope, Steel, Fortescue, Rio Tinto, Orica, Wesfarmers Chemicals, and as well we have investment and finance organisations such as Australian Super, CBUS and NAB, and energy service and infrastructure organisations such as Oricon, AGIG, APA Group, and we also have BP and Woodside. So we are bringing these organisations together to focus on these supply chains, and the we is Climate-KIC Australia and Climate-KIC. I'm, as Hudson said, with Climate-KIC Australia, but we are a team. And we're broader than just our two organisations as well. So the delivery team is complemented by CSIRO and Rocky Mountain Institute. And we have support from Bloomberg NEF and Energy Transition Commission. So the Energy Transition Commission is actually a global initiative, quite similar to our initiative, and was really the inspiration for setting up the Australian Industry Energy Transition Commission initiative here in Australia. We have support from ARENA, which has been vital and we're very grateful for. The overall objective through the initiative, as the current plan work program is defined, is to support pathways to net zero for our supply chains, and as well to support the development of tangible on-the-ground actions. And there are actions between these two and the interdependencies. So the projects and where we focus our efforts will be supported by the pathways, and the pathways will be informed and supported by the industry and other organisations working on the projects. When it comes to the projects, we're working on what we call, and throughout the first phase, early action projects. We're aiming towards larger demonstration projects for decarbonising these supply chains, and as well we're working on initiatives to support systems transition for these supply chains. When it comes to early action projects, throughout the first phase, there's been quite a lot of interest around low carbon or green steel, as well as carbon capture, utilisation and storage. And hydrogen as well has been a key area of interest. We have just released a number of reports summarising the findings and insights from the first phase of work. So we have on our website, which you can see here on this page, our highlights report, which is named Setting Up Industry for Net Zero. And we also have our technical report, which really dives into the detail on the technology options for decarbonising, in particular production, but as well also a little bit along the supply chain of our supply chains. And I encourage you all to go and read those reports if you're interested. I'll just highlight a few pieces from the report. So the overarching message from the first phase is that the transition to net zero even for these hard to abate sectors is and will indeed be possible by 2050, but it won't be without its challenges. It really is a massive ship to turn. We have in the report kind of laid out the technology options, the challenges, and as well framed up the options in terms of the pillars, material and energy efficiency, zero emissions energy, electrification, non-energy emissions reduction, as well as other offsets from capture, for example. What we've found is that many of the solutions that will be needed are mature today, and where they are not mature, they are emerging. So many of them are being demonstrated around the world. I'll just dive briefly into a little bit of the detail on the steel and iron ore supply chain, as well as aluminium. So when it comes to steel, we've divided up between iron ore production and steel making. And then in this table here, you can see color-coded depending on whether the solutions are the solutions needed to get us to 2050 or transition solutions or have a role in the shorter term. So the darker colors are those solutions that really are net zero compatible. So for iron ore production, the main game is around the materials movement, and decarbonising and reducing the use of diesel. So be that through hydrogen vehicles or electric vehicles. On the steel production side, so it is really using decarbonised electricity, renewable electricity for electric arc furnaces. And for virgin steel production, it's using electric arc furnaces together with hydrogen for the reduction of the iron itself. For aluminium, we've split it up between bauxite mining, alumina refining and smelting. And in this table, you can see as well that for bauxite mining, it's quite similar to iron ore production. So it's really about materials movement around electrifying and use of hydrogen. For aluminium smelting, it's also one of the main parts is around electrification. And for smelting, again, the main game is using decarbonised electricity and really green firmed electricity, which is something that it will be certainly very challenging for aluminium because of the amount of electricity that they require, but is something that is to work towards by 2050. There are other technology options for decarbonisation for both aluminium steel, and I encourage you to go to the technical report if you're interested in those. Another key finding from our report was the key opportunity in working together in regions and industrial precincts. And this, on the technical side, the opportunity really is around energy demand, so aggregating energy demand and optimizing between different organizations, as well as working together on electrification, pooling resources and needs around carbon capture, usage and storage, and as well hydrogen, where if you can produce and consume the hydrogen in the same location, you have a lot of big wins. On this map here, you can see example regions, which we've called out as they align to our supply chains and our current partnership, and where we're initially focused. But it's important to call out that in addition to Gladstone, Hunter Valley, Port Kembla, Kwinana and Pilbara, there are certainly other regions in Australia, Portland in Victoria, Northern Tasmania, Whyalla in South Australia, even areas in the Northern Territory, which equally apply. In addition to the technical opportunities, there are a lot of other kind of softer opportunities in working in industrial precincts and regions, and they're around the ability to coordinate and align multiple organisations to the same goal through visioning and setting missions, as well as lobbying and forming policy and regulation and pooling skills and knowledge resources. One thing I thought to call out particular for MECLA is what we've seen, that there are multiple levers for driving and supporting decarbonisation, where market or demand really is a key one, and that aligns to what you're working on with MECLA, which is really exciting to see. Within our initiative, we'll be working on developing initiatives, what we call system transition actions, where we identify, develop initiatives to address system level barriers and leverage points. So we're currently just have come to the end of phase 1 and moving into phases 2 and 3 in the coming 6 months to 12 months. So really focusing on the pathways and the projects. I think I will wrap it up there, and happy to answer any questions that you may have, and as well happy for you to reach out by email if that is of interest.
Jason, thank you very much. That was terrific. I was particularly interested in the link between materials, supply chains and geography there, not just the organisations, because that's, in a country the size of ours, that's obviously a big part of it. Thank you. Let's come to questions at the end if we have time. I'd like to keep moving if we can now though. Our second speaker is Sophia Hamblin Wang, Chief Operating Officer from Carbonation International. Sophia, are you good to go?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, great.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much for having me. This is such a phenomenal group of movers and shakers, and it's really a delight to be involved with a do tank. First time I've heard that saying. So first of all, I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal land, and I pay my respects also to the elders past, present and future. And yeah, today I'm going to talk a bit about MCI and our journey thus far, and a little bit about the way that our technology is growing out. And my background is that I'm the COO of the company, and I focus a lot on the advocacy and public facing work, which is very relevant right now because when you work in carbon capture and use, or carbon capture and utilization, there's quite a lot of education that you need to be providing to the public and policymakers, as well as organizations, for what our technology actually does. So I'll go through a little bit of that with you today. So MCI's mission is to remove 1 billion tons of CO2 safely and permanently. And I think we're pretty on track to be doing that by 2040. Which is quite exciting. And we want to be a world-leading provider of integrated carbon solutions. Now, we know that our climate goals, they need emissions reduction and carbon removal solutions. We even at best estimates, with all of the climate projections, we will probably be needing to suck CO2 out of the atmosphere in the future. So we're really starting to focus on how to reduce emissions and remove them from the atmosphere at the same time. And also focusing on how to do so profitably. So we, at the moment, if we captured all of the emissions from industry, what would we be doing with those emissions? There's currently not really enough end storage or utilization options. So it's our job right now to scale and sprint as fast as we can to build technologies that are going to do something with the CO2. So MCI, proudly Australian clean tech. We had our founders, Orica and Green Mag, collaborated with the University of Newcastle to be funded for a pilot project back in 2013. Now, that's when I came on board. I'm the first employee of the company in 2013, quit a PhD to come and build a team to design and build a pilot plant in Newcastle. It's quite an elegant solution that we've got going right now at the Newcastle Institute for Energy and Resources, where we take CO2 from Orica's ammonium nitrate factory. We then process that CO2 into various materials that I'll go into. We also have conducted research in our pilot and CRCP with the University of Newcastle, University of Sydney, Columbia University in the United States, and A-Star, with quite a lot of IP emerging, but most of our IP is also in know-how and research secrecy. We collaborate with Siemens, and actually quite a lot of you are familiar faces. So apologies if you already know some of the things that I'm saying, but many of the members of this group have NDAs with us. So unfortunately, I can't talk about who we're working with, but I can talk about what we're doing. And yeah. We're also just about to close a cornerstone capital raise, where we probably will have an announcement this week. So I wish I had something to tell you right now, but watch this space. We are a team of process engineers, chemical engineers, geologists, and commercialization experts. A relatively small team that you can see here, that's most of us, but we're actually expanding about double right now because we just attracted a fairly large grant. So This is our team in Newcastle. What does MCI do? Okay, so we take, so first of all, we start off with a feedstock. That's going to be relevant to everybody here. So we take any feedstock with a magnesium or a calcium component in it. So that can be steel slags, mine tailings, incinerator bottom ash, lots of different industrial wastes are relevant, and we characterize those. We also can use virgin feedstocks that are quarried. So we focus on serpentinites, but also olivine, and there are other rocks around the world. And we process them in our state-of-the-art reactor, which I've got it behind me. And we process it in Newcastle with CO2, like I said, from Orica, but we can actually use raw flue gas, low dilute CO2, and other greenhouse gases as well. So we just completed a CRCP that focused on the integration of simulated flue gas into our project. So we're feeling very good about the industrial integration of mineral carbonation technology. Also, we can do direct air capture. We can integrate basically with any industrial source of CO2 or sucked out of the atmosphere. We then produce 3 main outputs: magnesium carbonate and silica, or calcium carbonate and silica. And then there are some other metal oxides as additional products, but they're not the bulk of what we do. Those outputs are then processed into products, which is what you're all most excited about, right? It's we're focusing at the moment publicly on cementitious products, plasterboard and drywall, and other novel materials. And when I speak publicly, like when I was at the World Economic Forum or speaking at the UN, I always show my, the prototypes that, oh, you can't see it with the thing, but yeah, we've got like a cementitious briquette and a plasterboard that's a negative emissions drywall plasterboard. What we do is actually, we're not a product company. We're looking for global partnerships in products with product companies in order to design and distribute what we do. So we've actually done a fair amount of work already on products, but we're constantly looking for new partners and new formulations. So please do get in touch if that is something that interests you.
3 kilometres from their homes, where surveillance choppers are used to track down people who camp in remote.
Yep. Okay. So we've been focusing a fair amount on sustainable minerals recently. So we do have a mining application where we can lower the carbon intensity of nickel, cobalt, iron, lithium, a lot of different minerals that, like I said, if the mine tailings have a magnesium or a calcium content, then we can combine that with the CO2 in our output and produce things for sale. Now that's the key, is that I might come back to this, but we have had a lot of problem in the past with people not understanding what carbon capture and use is, because we are not carbon capture and storage, and we're also not carbon capture, use and storage, although we will take that if we have to. So we call ourselves CCU, carbon capture and use or utilization, because CCS is a great technology on its own, but we are a part of the circular economy. We turn waste gas and industrial wastes into brand new products for use in the built environment, whereas CCS is an underground storage solution. It's a linear, like take and make and waste. And so we've been trying to ensure that we don't always get lumped in with CCS, because we are a whole different kettle of fish. Now, CCUS is usually used to describe enhanced oil recovery plus CCS. Happy to go into that in more detail later, but probably, you know, for a different forum. Okay, so the co-founders of MCI started with a coffee and a thought experiment of, well, what is the largest possible way that we could be storing and using CO2? Like what's a scalable technological solution that exists? And they found mineral carbonation from a literature review and some collaboration with researchers. And basically the Earth's crust already stores an enormous amount of CO2 naturally through weathering and mineral carbonation. So what we've done is we've just taken that process from a geological time frame, you know, millions of years, into a matter of 20 minutes or so in our carbon reactor, in our carbon plants. So it's effectively scalable to the nth degree, because there's enough mineral carbonation feedstocks in the earth to lock away all of the CO2 that has ever or will ever be produced by fossil fuels, which is like a crazy statement. So a couple of points that you might find interesting. Our business model is based upon the fact that we don't need a carbon price to be profitable, particularly in the short and medium term. When we start to get to like enormous quantities, then a carbon price may come in, but we are financially viable, you know, in this term. We don't need concentrated CO2. I mentioned low energy. We don't have additives or chemicals or fancy carbon accounting. We do full life cycle assessments from go to woe. And yeah, we're confident to say that we're a permanent, you know, 10,000 year storage of CO2 into our minerals. Now, the demand for low carbon materials is rising, and we do really need these market forces to give prompts to the government to help with a little bit of legislation. There is movement this year, definitely in that area, but a little bit more is probably needed in order to ensure that technologies like MCI get through the valley of death, which is, you know, last I checked, it's 3 valleys of death, and then it's a canyon of death. It's just really difficult to build a technology from laboratory into market. There's so many risks, so many ways to fail, and frankly, technologies that have ambitious climate targets really do need that extra push and that extra support from, ideally from government, but from anywhere, in order to build their business model for the good of the earth. Mineral feedstocks are, like I said, abundant, and this is just a serpentinite map that you can match to what you like. If you're interested, I can come back to it later. We produce, like I said, amorphous silica, calcium carbonate, and magnesium carbonate. These are some of the applications that we have investigated and that might be of interest to you, including seawalls and all kinds of, you know, combining climate mitigation and adaptation together. We're at TRL level 6, and we think the first of its kind, the largest of its kind pilot plant in the world in Newcastle. And we have the aim to decarbonize several industries, including hydrogen, electricity, mining, steel, and cement. Now, like I said, we have the ability to process the wastes in the middle, different kinds of waste feedstocks, but that can also be combined with serpentinite or virgin rock in order to lock away, you know, millions and billions of tons of CO2. We're raising growth capital. We're opening a much larger capital raise at the beginning of 2022 after COP. and are basically looking for strategic investors and ESG and climate funds. And we've just been announced as the recipient of a $14.6 million grant from the federal government, which was really a really good sign for us that the government is supportive of developing technologies in the circular carbon economy. Angus Taylor basically awarded us the second largest amount in the whole fund, with the largest going to Santos, which is, you know, a really large company. We're just a smaller Australian tech company, so we're really encouraged by that. And we've had quite a significant amount of global exposure for the direction of the carbon capture and use industry, and the way that we can create new global markets and new jobs and regional activation whilst also achieving our Paris goals. So these are just some of the things that happened in 2020. And please do contact me or my CEO, Marcus Dorr, and we're happy to talk you through anything and have a bit more of an investigation. Thank you.
Sophia, thank you very much. That was fascinating. I think the alignment to the circular economy will pique a lot of interest, and the concept of dramatically accelerated biomimicry, taking what the Earth has done over tens of thousands of years and doing it in the matter of minutes. And then the scalability sounds great. The idea that it's profit is the key. I think if it's just philanthropy, it's very hard to replicate, but if it's profitable and it can get the investment, then off you go. There have been some interesting questions in the chat, which we'll come to at the end. I'm sure you'll have answers, because they're sound questions getting to the nub of long-term resilience and where the carbon really goes. Yep. So let's come back to that. But thank you very much. Very exciting technology, and to be doing it in the Hunter, a region going through transition. How fantastic.
And if you want, Hudson, I can also respond to some of the questions in the chat.
By all means.
Would you prefer? Yes. Yeah. Okay, great.
Good idea. Thank you. All right. Our third speaker is David Eckstein, an environmental advisor to the sustainability team at the City of Sydney. And he's going to talk to us about their experience with low carbon construction materials. So David, over to you.
Just check you can hear me okay now. Thank you. Yes, thanks for the chance to contribute today. I really appreciate it. I wish I could say I'd quit a PhD to do what I do, but I quit as a sole trader consultant to come to the city some 6-7 years ago, and actually it's been a great experience. So I'll be giving a short overview of some of our initiatives at the city, and particularly spotting the drivers and blockers that have helped or hindered us. And there's a short video in this presentation as well that I hope will run successfully. It's only 30 seconds. I do want to acknowledge, in particular, I work in a sustainability strategy team at the city, but what I'm presenting, it only happens because of proactivity by our CETO team, that's our civil works managers and contract coordinators. And I just really want to give a big shout out to those guys in our infrastructure team, and also to Stephen Forster and Steve Summerhays, who probably aren't on the line today, but they've been instrumental too from UNSW, helping push us along the way. Now that slide should have changed. Okay. This strategic context slide, it's a bit dull, but at the same time, it's really important because the city, like all government agencies these days, we have 3 or 5 year sustainability plans that we try and weave into our operating plans and our overarching governance structures. These are the new directions. We had an environment strategy 2016-2021, and we just moved into our new phase. Our new environment strategy has just been adopted. And it has it's pared back in terms of its density, but now is more focused, which is a good outcome. And I really just put this up here to show you we have these 4 directions: smart and resilient cities, city operations, efficient and future-proof buildings, regenerative and inclusive city, and strong foundations for delivery. And the rings I've thrown around those just pick up on the fact that the concept of circular economy and reduced carbon in construction materials, they're reflected in each of those directions. You know, when I actually sat down and did this little sort of mapping exercise, it was like, right, so every one of our directions comes has a touch point with this theme that Meckler is you know, is front and center in Meckler's mind. You know, whether it's our civil works, whether it's specifying in procurement, supply chain, planning approvals, circular economy, and staff capabilities, which is really critical. So these rather sometimes dry documents are still very useful for us because they enable us to refresh every couple of years or every 3 or 4 years. They give us conviction and they keep us focused, so that, you know, many requests come into us, and sometimes we just need to say, what are our core directions, what are our core commitments, and that can help drive us forward. We're not new in this space. We first sort of moved into the lower energy or reduced embodied energy space a decade ago, and that was in the asphalt space in particular, moving away from hot mix to warm mix asphalts. And then soon after, we started including recycled asphalt in our pavements. So most of our roadways are asphalt rather than concrete. Most of our footpaths are tile and concrete rather than asphalt. Now we don't manufacture asphalt ourselves. Obviously, there's a couple of major providers, and one of them down were proactive in developing products, and so they have a line of asphalt that has a different recycled asphalt content, and we certainly make use of that. Hand on heart, do we do it every time? I don't think we do. When I recently checked in with our roadways coordinator, there are times when we do use a higher proportion of recycled asphalt and times when we don't. So that tells me we need to keep looking at our own processes and spot whether this is a supply issue or whether it's more to do with our specification on particular projects. So, you know, getting consistency around the use of these materials is really important, and that flows back to many of you on the call today. Toner Pave, interesting product with cartridge recycling, so for photocopying cartridges, and the waste, they're a pretty noxious material, but that material has been embedded into asphalt as well. So, and then in 2018, a product called Reconophalt, which extended the range of waste materials used in asphalt. This is really an exciting product. There are some compliance hurdles some environmental compliance hurdles that still just need to be resolved, but there's a significant opportunity to embed unwanted, undesirable waste products into a useful product. So I just put that up there to say that concrete's a new space for us, and previously we were active in other spaces. Now, I think probably the interest is particularly strong in this particular project I'm about to describe, which is our geopolymer trial. And that's where I particularly want to acknowledge Stephen Foster and Steve Summerhays in driving this along for us. So Steve explained geopolymer as an alternative concrete product to us probably 3 years ago at least. And we had you know, a good internal meeting, a wide range of staff, but with a lot of interest, but getting action really required a sort of second round, and Steve came back to us, and we tightened our message internally, and we got a result. So it's not for me to explain in detail what geopolymer is, but essentially it's full replacement of Portland cement. So you get a cement product, sorry, a concrete product for construction purposes that doesn't feature any Portland cement, and obviously Portland cement is an energy intensive process. I think about a ton per ton of CO2 per ton produced, so very energy intensive. So displacing that has been really important. We found a site in Alexandria, a very busy main road en route to the airport actually, with high traffic volumes, and we managed to put, and I'll run this video in a moment, we managed to put a section of geopolymer cement, geopolymer concrete rather, into the roadway, and matched it at exactly the same time a week later with a regular pour of standard general purpose concrete with standard cement mix. And that was quite exciting to place this into a high impact environment and to have direct comparability in terms of how stable and robust that the product was. There were sensors installed in the slab. You can see on the right there some of the sensors being installed by UNSW staff, CRC for Low Carbon Living, and the engineering department of UNSW. And then on the bottom right, you can just see that section of cement or concrete there, which is taking traffic. Now, geopolymer makes use of slag and fly ash and alkali binders, so it takes waste product, in particular from the mining and steel manufacture, or power stations and steel manufacturing, and converts those into a useful product. Just before I go to the next slide, where the video will hopefully run, our next steps are to use another low-E concrete product, but not geopolymer. This is a product, a standard commercially available product, just coming on stream now in terms of ready availability. And we were due to do that, July last month, but unfortunately, with the construction impacts of COVID shutdown, etc., that's just on a month or two delay. But it is our civil contractors who are motivated to deliver this, and so we're just looking for 5 good sites to use this product and to increase our confidence that it's good for the go forward. Now the moment of truth, and see whether this little video runs. It's 30 seconds, and what this is, it's got a bit of a soundtrack, music soundtrack to it, but essentially it just shows that geopolymer piece. Kathy, here I go. So that all took place over a couple of weekends, a couple of mornings' work, or maybe a whole day's work for each piece. But it was standard contractors delivering installing the product with Wagner's advisors on site to help us with the product. So it wasn't like we had to go and get a different team to install it. They just needed some briefing on particular WHS aspects of geopolymer, and it's gone really smoothly, and the results are very positive. Is structurally very sound. Now, whoop, I thought that, okay, so last 2 slides, just to talk you through some of the drivers and non-drivers. So we've had specifications in our public-facing code. So on the right there, the city streetscape code there has for a long time had a reference to the Green Star concrete credit rating method, and it has the language about encouraging alternative materials and aggregates. But I'd have to say that the specifications alone haven't driven change. It's really been external partnerships which have kicked us forward, whether it was Downer talking to us, or whether it was Double Steve Act from UNSW. Those things moved us from intent to action for ourselves, and I can't stress the importance enough of those partnerships. And this is the last slide. I just sort of thought that it's really important to stress the role of people in the process. So the technology can be sorted, but brilliant, but people. So we need our executive to know that the community are looking and expecting these, and they've signalled to us clearly they expect these changes in how we do things, the lower carbon outcomes. Our program delivery managers are critical. Very important to take the specification engineers with you, of course. And we've had a really proactive contractor in this concrete space, and that's really helped. They're not resistant, they're up for innovation. And one of the reasons is that in the contract they have with us, they are rewarded, not directly financially, but they're rewarded in terms of the go forward by demonstrating that they're up for innovation themselves. So, people, critical, process is important, but I can't stress enough the importance of people in achieving change. Hudson, I think that's me done.
Fantastic, David. Thank you. I think those insights into change management really cap it off nicely. The the city leadership that the City of Sydney is known for, it's fantastic to hear behind the scenes just the reflection and the acknowledgement that leadership only comes about with deep collaboration. And each of the speakers so far have talked about collaboration and the fact that it's the coming together of multiple parties to achieve these fantastic changes. So David, thank you for that. I think I can see a case study there, mate. Would be fantastic. You've already
got it. It's in your intro.
Even better. That's wonderful. Thank you. Look, that's a really great way to wrap up the formal part of the three speakers. Thank you to the three of you. I know there've been some questions in the chat, but I guess we have a few minutes now before wrapping up and talking next steps for Meckler. If anyone would like to ask of our three speakers a burning question, I invite you to do so. Sophia, let me break the silence and throw something at you. In terms of the long-term capture of the carbon that you're taking out of an industrial process and turning it as an input into your products, can you talk to that? How long can you confirm that that's locked away?
Yeah, so again, I'm not a chemical engineer, but our engineering team work with our industrial partners on these kinds of studies, and we're confident to say that in the carbonate itself, it's 10,000 years worth of storage. It's an exothermic reaction, so it's the most stable form of storing CO2 that exists in the world. And in fact, if you wanted to turn it back into a hydrocarbon, you would have back into carbon dioxide, you'd have to add energy into it. So we're quite confident about the storage time, but however, I was just replying for him about this as well, is that we do need to deepen and broaden the studies into different applications. Of course, in the construction industry, you're going to need to know a lot of these critical durability and tensile strength, all of those kinds of things. We're collaborating with Smartcrete and with quite a lot of other companies on deepening and broadening our studies, but at the moment we're at pilot scale. We're scaling up into demonstration, so it's like we're going as fast as we can. But they are all absolutely things that are critical to keep in mind, and there are a lot of companies that would be taking the product if we had it right now, but we're sprinting.
Sure thing. Thank you, Sophia. I'd ask a question, if I can, of maybe both Sophia and Jason, and that is around the finance component. Jason, you mentioned that in your collaboration of I guess heavy hitters, there are investment and finance partners as well. We know the TCFD framework is driving enlightened capital away from carbon intensive investment sectors and towards those that are reducing their carbon intensity and their carbon exposure. I'm just wondering if you could comment on the overlap there, maybe first Jason and then Sophia.
Yeah, I think the ESG framework is really central, and a lot of the super companies and the banks are really looking to align their portfolios to net zero by 2050, which means that they are working actively with the companies that they're invested in to support them in the steps that they need to make. So this can be around governance, working with them on their strategic investment plans and really helping them to move in the right direction. And when they're looking at opportunities as well, I think they're looking for best in class. So within different sectors, they're making sure that the companies that they're working with are aware of the risks, potential risks in stranded assets or investments in industries that will change dramatically, as well as the upside, the opportunities that will come from the shift to net zero.
That's terrific. Sophia, your perspective on that?
So the world is now in a race to net zero. I think in the past 18 months, we've really seen the largest and most ambitious leading companies in the world saying they're going to get to net zero by 2050 and starting to really exert some pressure. I think that the really cheap and easy low-hanging fruit of carbon offsets is starting to be absolutely gobbled up, and there's an unbelievable amount of finance in the market trying to help people to get to this target that is, frankly, I'm not sure how the world is currently going to get there, where we need a portfolio of solutions. Many different solutions need to be developed from now in this crucial decade. So what we've seen at MCI is an enormous amount of interest from industry, particularly from the mining sector and from the hard to abate, just thinking about how to minimize the amount of liability in the future, but also if you can make money at the same time, it's kind of a no-brainer. But I think that most technologies that are in this space that are at TRL 2 and onwards, they're all going to get funding, and a significant amount of funding in this next decade. I can't see any other way.
That's a good note of optimism to wrap up on. If you have one message to MECLA participants, what would it be? I'll go to you first, Sophia, and then to Jason and to David.
Use your market power to show that you care about low carbon products and the circular carbon economy. People are watching and listening and following what you're doing. And if you use your market leadership in order to pull everybody else up, the amount of emissions potential that you can be influencing is really enormous.
Terrific. Thank you, Sophia. Jason?
Yeah, I think really the importance to think the value chain or the supply chain, so both up and down, and aggregating demand and really demonstrating the opportunity that will certainly drive the heavy industry in terms of understanding where the opportunity is. So yeah, really important work.
Thank you, Jason. And David, final words.
Take your design and specifying engineers with you from the get-go. Don't let them, don't leave them blowing in the wind until you're 3/4 of the way through an intent. Take them with you, and if necessary, remind them of corporate obligations and commitments to carbon, so that they understand, okay, I'm part of the solution here. Fantastic.
Carrots and sticks. That sounds good. David, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all our three speakers, Jason, Sophia and David, for their insights and coalface experience. It's been a really fantastic short fire burst from each of them. I've certainly learned a lot, and our speakers are available for further contact by the emails in the chat. We are going to need to wrap up, but before we do, I want to just remind everybody that June, July has been case study month. There's still a window to get case studies in to demonstrate what you've been up to in your organisation. We have a spotlight on timber coming up. That date is to be confirmed. Obviously, COVID lockdowns throw all sorts of organisational planning into chaos, but we'll keep planning, and we'll let you know. We'll be hosting a spotlight on steel and a spotlight on concrete later in the year. In the meantime, our working groups, the doers, will keep doing the do tank work, and we hope to report back from each of those working groups in one of our future meetings coming up. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll be seeking input from our member experts. Ben Waters from Precinct, my colleague, has been developing a model capable of quantifying the impacts of the interventions that Meckler is advocating. So we need experts from our ecosystem to help us understand what those interventions might look like. So please stay tuned for details on that. A special thank you for today's session for Kathy Verheyen from Climate-KIC, who has recently joined Meckler to help us with our project management and events and general admin. Kathy's been fantastic so far, so really thank you for adding weight to our capability. Thank you also to Monica Richter from WWF, who helps pull these events together and really does make it all happen. So let's keep this momentum up. I feel really optimistic after hearing those 3 speakers today, and I hope you've learned something, can take something away, and can share through the case studies what you've been up to. For now, thanks everybody. From Meckler, goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks, Hudson.